All right, yesterday, in looking at the New Kingdom period of ancient Egypt, we saw that the people that were there during the second intermediate period were driven out. What was the name of those people? Who were the people that invaded Egypt during the second intermediate period? Hyksos, right. And what weapon did they bring with them? What new weapon? Chariot. And who was it that drove them out? No, they were Amorites. Who drove the Hyksos out of Egypt? The person.
Amos?
Amos, the first. Right here. We talked about that in Exodus chapter 1. We have this Pharaoh, Amenhotep. Notice the Amen there still we have from possibly the time of Abraham. We have Tutmos the first, or Tutmosis the first, it's spelled different ways, is the Pharaoh of Exodus 1:15 to 22. That Pharaoh then has a son, and that's what we're going to look at next. So, Amenhotep the first is the one who began the persecution of the Hebrews. Remember, Ahmose had driven out the Hyksos, had driven out the other Semites, enslaved some Semites who were there, and so it's presumed that the Israelites would have been enslaved by Amos the first, but Amenhotep the first is the one mentioned here that began actively persecuting them, making it difficult for them. And then Tutmos the first is the one that conducted the genocide of killing the male children that were born, and you read about that in Exodus. Oh, I should ask you first of all to, because you were to have read that for today, Exodus 1 through 7:5. Were there some things in there that you found particularly interesting, or things that you didn't remember reading about before, Mia?
In chapter 3, verse 14, is when God says to Moses, "I am who I am." And I was reading at the bottom in my study Bible, and it said, the occurrences of I am in verse 14 are all forms of the Hebrew verb to be, but the word translated I am can also be translated I will be.
Yeah, so it has a present and a future sense to it. And we know that name as the name Yahweh. It comes from that I am. Okay? What else stood out to you? Or something you didn't know before?
Like when Pharaoh's daughter, like when he paid Moses' like mother, like for the taxes and that stuff, and it covered it.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that Moses' mother was the one that was hired to take care of her son Moses, and got paid to do it. So she was paid to do something that she would have willingly done, but because the baby boys were being killed, she obeyed God apparently, and put Moses out in that little ark, little boat, and it all worked out that she ended up being paid. Okay, that's interesting. What else? Matthew?
Like when Moses was sent like down the river in the little boat, when his mother like hid him, I guess, and sent him away. I thought it was interesting how like the royal like family took him in.
Yeah. Of all the people that could have discovered him along the shore of the Nile River, who was it? It was a member of the royal family. And that has a great impact, as we're going to see today. Is that your hand up?
Yeah. I was just thinking, was it a basket that he rode in, or was it a boat?
It was a basket that functioned as a boat.
Okay.
Yeah, it was floating like a boat. So I called it a little boat. I think some of the translations call it an ark, made of bulrushes, made out of the reeds that grow there. Okay. Anything else that you didn't remember reading before or hearing about? Okay. Is there anybody who did not read the assigned chapters in Exodus? 1 through 7:5. which is going to overlap with what we are doing today. So we have these pharaohs, and then we come to the next one, and that's Thutmose II, named after his father. Now, Thutmose I has a son, Thutmose II, and he has a daughter whose name is Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut, he has another child too, but Hatshepsut is his favorite child. You know how fathers can dote on their daughters. Yeah, well, that's the case here. Hatshepsut becomes very important as we're going to see in Egyptian history, but I think she's even more important to us as we're looking at the book of Exodus and at biblical history, because this is where they intertwine, because I believe that Hatshepsut was the princess that found Moses and took him out of the Nile. And so she adopted Moses. Now, did you notice when you're reading that Moses was the name that she gave him? That's not his Hebrew name. That's an Egyptian name. Did you notice something that I didn't notice until just a few years ago? That the name Moses is in the name Thutmose, the first and second. So the name Moses had family significance. Now it says that she named him Moses because she brought him out of the Nile. Well, the word Moses in Egyptian means birth or born of. And so what she is saying there is that as far as she is concerned, in her experience at getting Moses out of the Nile, that he was born out of the Nile. He was birthed from the Nile. And so she called him Moses, which, as I said, is already a part of the family names. All right, so Moses was born in slavery to a Hebrew woman, but rescued by Princess Hatshepsut. And then when he's old enough to leave his mother, his biological mother, when he's no longer nursing, he is taken into the palace, and he is raised in the palace as a prince. Did you realize that? Hatshepsut is the favorite daughter of her father Thutmose I. And so you can imagine Moses had everything that he could want, and he was educated according to the Egyptians. Now, all the sons of Thutmose I and his wife Amos died young. He had 5 legitimate sons, 2 illegitimate sons, as well as a daughter. At his death, the only one that was left was Hatshepsut. And here's Hatshepsut in the busts that she had made of herself. Let's look a little bit at her first, then we'll talk about the family tree. All right, so here's some busts she had, because she is going to become Pharaoh. I'll clue you in on that. So here is a sphinx of her. Here she is sitting as king. And there's another face, mask. Okay, so here we are. Here's the family tree. So we will begin here with Thutmose I, and here are his children, all of them, but most of them die except for Hatshepsut and Thutmose II. Now notice that Thutmose II has a different mother than Hatshepsut. Do you see? Are you following along here? So Hatshepsut's mother is here. Thutmose II's mother is here. All right, so that's going to provide a particular situation we're going to see here. So, because Hatshepsut is the only one to survive out of these children from Ahmes she's the only one that has royal blood. The royal blood comes from the mother's side, and so it comes from her mother. And so she's the one that has royalty. Now, Thutmose I wanted his son Thutmose II to rule after him. But he doesn't have the royal blood. Hatshepsut does. So what he does is he has Thutmose II marry his half-sister Hatshepsut in order to make that connection with the royal line. So this is a half-brother and half-sister that are married together that are ruling over Egypt. Now, at the time that they got married, Hatshepsut was 15 and Thutmose II was 12. Now he, besides being 12, and I don't know if you guys remember, I'm sure the girls remember what are 12-year-old boys like, right? Well, in addition to that, he was also physically and mentally disabled. So as much as you might think 12-year-old boys are mentally disabled anyway, this guy really was, all right? Griff is taking offense. In fact, he could, you're supposed, when you become Pharaoh, you're supposed to lead the troops out into battle, but he wasn't able to do it. It wasn't until his 3rd year that he was able to go with his troops. And Hatshepsut remained in the royal palace while he was out. In the meanwhile, she basically took over control of the government. She was running things. And she gained a lot of power and influence among the priests, who are very powerful in Egypt. Now, from the markings on his mummy, archaeologists believe that Thutmose II had a skin disease and that he died after ruling only 3 or 4 years. So at that point, Hatshepsut, his half-sister / wife, had produced no offspring from him. You can understand that maybe she really didn't want to be around him that much. I don't know. So she did not have any offspring for him, but she does have a daughter, Neferure, through her close friend Sanmut. He's kind of an advisor to her. So she does have a daughter, but not from Thutmose II. Thutmose II does have a son through his good friend. His name is Isis, but not through Hatshepsut. All right, let's see. So that means that Thutmose III is in line for the throne after Thutmose II because Hatshepsut has no sons, although she does have the royal blood in her. So Thutmose III is in line for the throne, but he's so young when Thutmose II dies that Hatshepsut rules in his place. She's what's called the Queen Dowager. She's the one that is ruling just until he's old enough, kind of helping him out along the way. Do you believe that? Well, the same problem occurred again. Hatshepsut had 2 daughters. The first one married her half-brother, who is over here, Thutmose III. I guess I'm not going to get into all the details because there's a lot of stuff going on between brothers and sisters and half-brothers, half-sisters, all this stuff. But the point is that Thutmose III was too young to rule. Hatshepsut was ruling in his place. Now, while they're ruling together, Hatshepsut is shown on scenes pictured in Egyptian walls following Thutmose III. During the 1st and 2nd years of his reign, 2 temples were built as memorials of a dead king earlier. And in these, Thutmose III is shown as king, while Hatshepsut's name came second after him. And she's shown wearing women's clothes and a queen's crown. And the title that she has is the Great Royal Wife and the God's Wife of Ammon. Later on, Thutmose III is mentioned as the king building the memorial of the god Khnum, whereas Hatshepsut was also shown in women's clothes. In a temple dedicated later, a couple different temples dedicated. She's still wearing the same thing. During the second year of his reign, Hatshepsut transferred her post as God's wife of Ammon to her daughter, Neferure, who was given some royal authorities. And she's still shown in women's clothes and crown. But for the first time, she appears exercising the rituals of a pharaoh and has the title King of Upper and Lower Egypt. So she, even in the pictures that are depicting her life, show her as getting more and more power, while her stepson, nephew slash well, whatever, is too young to rule. So in the 7th year, Hatshepsut was officially crowned, and she acquired the posts of both king and queen. So she was both king and queen of Egypt, and the names that were added to her were things that had female and male parts to them. The 8th year, she started being recognized only as the male title, and was never shown in female clothing again, except in a very small private tomb and minor altars. But as Thutmose III is growing up, her ruling is becoming a little more tenuous, because when he gets old enough, she might have to give up her power. And she's not going to want to do that. And he resented the fact that when he got old enough, she wouldn't give up her power. She kept ruling Egypt, even though he was old enough to do it. Now, we don't know exactly what happened or how anything happened, but at some point, Hatshepsut dies. I think that, but before we do that, let me show you some pictures of Hatshepsut's temple. This is the temple she built out in the middle of nowhere, up inside of a mountain. It's on the side of a mountain. It was an amazing place. Can you see how big it is? Here it is from a different angle. Everything is so straight, so exact, precise, yet it comes out of the side of a mountain. Some think that she picked this spot because of a particular feature of this mountain, and I'm not sure you can see it here. There's a woman of the mountain that is sometimes visible. Let's see, you might be able to see it here. I got to step back this way to see if I can spot it. I can't always see it. I think this is it right here. That they think that looks like a woman, with her arm across here like that. And so some think that that's why she picked this spot, because it's below this woman that's in the mountain. Well, who knows? It's hard to tell. This is a little closer look at her temple that she built. It's the walkway, first level going up to the second level. That is a statue of a falcon, which is at the entrance, which represents protection. That is a representation of Horus, the falcon. There are all these statues that are outside the temple as you're going in. I believe they're of Hatshepsut herself. It's hard to tell because at this point she starts making her statues look like a man. She even starts wearing a fake beard and dresses like a man to indicate her power. You see here what was one time the rod or the whip, and here's the shepherd's crook that's still being used. Now, nearby there's a burial chamber that they say is for the chief engineer of this temple, the person who built the temple, whose name is Senemu. Now, our guide, Midu, in Egypt, felt that that this was actually Moses. He said that whenever a great construction was initiated, that it was always the Pharaoh's son that was in charge of it. So he thinks, anyway, that this would have been Moses. Moses was her son, and he would have been in charge of building the temple. Don't know. That's just his speculation. Excuse me. This is an obelisk of Hatshepsut in the Temple of Karnak. It's a different place. This obelisk was put there by her. It has a lot of hieroglyphics on it. Here's a section of the hieroglyphics. You can see close up. Pretty good shape, still after thousands of years. And we get even closer, we see, what is that called? Does anyone remember? Cartouche, which indicates what? It's the Pharaoh. That's the name of the Pharaoh. And that's her cartouche right there with her as her name in hieroglyphics at the Temple of Karnak. All right, now let's get back to Moses. Moses, of course, comes from the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Among Jacob's 12 sons, he is a Levite, the tribe of Levi, and then it goes to Kohath. Amram is his father, and Amram had two sons, Moses and Aaron. Okay, you're all clear on that? Remember that? All right. So, what happened to Moses? What happened to him in Egypt? Why? And remember that this Moses would have been, as the son, adopted son of Hatshepsut, he was certainly a prince in the palace, and may have even been considered to be next in line to be Pharaoh. We don't know for sure, but he certainly was in a position of authority. But what did he do? He killed an Egyptian, right? Now, there's a little speculation on my part, because no one knows for sure when Hatshepsut died and when Moses fled Egypt, but it seems likely to me, if Hatshepsut was still alive, as powerful as she was, Moses could have done anything and would have gotten away with it, right? So the fact that he had to flee indicates to me that Hatshepsut has died. And if Hatshepsut has died, then that means Thutmose III is in control. And how does Thutmose III feel about Hatshepsut, his aunt / stepmother Hatshepsut? What's he feel about her?
Dislikes her.
Intensely. Why? Because she wouldn't give up power when he was old enough to get it. Remember that? Keep that in mind. So, if Hatshepsut's dead and Thutmose III is now in power, and Moses, the stepson of Hatshepsut, murders somebody, what's Thutmose III going to do? Is he going to let it go? No. That's why Moses has to flee, I think. And so where does he go? He goes to the land of Midian, which is far away from Egypt, as far as he can get in the areas that he knows. And he marries a woman there, Zipporah, who is the daughter of the person that Moses becomes employed by in watching his sheep. So Moses goes, now think about this. Moses goes from being a pampered prince in the palace of the most advanced civilization of its time to being a shepherd out in the middle of nowhere. Would that be humbling? Yeah, definitely. And of course, it's when he is watching these sheep that he experiences the burning bush. Now, does anybody know about how old Moses was when he had to flee Egypt? He was about 40 years old. That's not usually how you see it in the pictures in Sunday school and stuff, right? He looks like a young man, but he's 40. How long is he tending sheep before God appears to him in a burning bush? It's easy to remember. It's another 40 years. So he's 80 years old when this happens. Again, not the way you usually picture it, right? And he hears the voice of God coming out of the burning bush. And what does the voice tell him? What does God tell him to do? Yeah, he said, go down to Egypt and bring the people out. And I won't go into the details. You've read them. You know what happens there. So Moses is there, and now he's going to go back to Egypt. Now, in the meantime, we've said Thutmose III took over. I've told you how much he hates Hatshepsut. In fact, he hates her so much that he went through all the land of Egypt and cut off her name from as many temples and monuments as he could. He didn't get them all, but he just wanted to erase her name from history. He hated her that much. This is a real statue of Thutmose III, and here's a drawing, a painting that somebody did. And I like the fact that they do portray him as a black person because that's what he would have been. By the way, when you watch, how many of you have watched the movie Prince of Egypt, a cartoon of about Moses? Oh, you haven't? Okay, well, good. I don't have to correct the errors in it then. When you watch cartoons, movies about Moses, about the Exodus, there are so many things that they get wrong. And one of them we'll get to, and that is which Pharaoh was actually the Pharaoh at the Exodus. All right, so here we are. We have Thutmose III. All right, so he doesn't live long enough to see Moses come back. But during his reign, he is really ambitious and energetic. He conducts 17 military campaigns in 19 years. So he's on the move. He's out there conquering territories. He has the first professional army in history. What's a professional army as opposed to a non-professional? Highly trained. What else are they? What's it mean to be a professional? Yeah. What else are you? How do you get good at it? How do you make? Well, how do you get all this experience if you're out farming and making things? You get that experience because you're paid to be a soldier. You don't do anything else. If you're a professional soldier, that means you are not doing other things. You're not farming, you're not smithing, you're not doing anything. You are a soldier full time. So he has a professional army. And that army goes all the way up to the Syria-Palestine area, north of Israel, and fights against an army at a place called Megiddo. Megiddo is where the Battle of Armageddon is to take place. All right, now during his reign, the priests gain a lot of power and wealth. He favors the priests. They get more power. A new middle class of scribes comes into existence, and petty officials. So there are more people in government. There are people that are paid to be scribes. A lot of people are doing that. Now, he dies finally in Exodus 2, 23 to 25. And so a new Pharaoh comes on the throne. And his name is Amenhotep, or Amenophis II. Now, during his reign, there's been discovered a topographical list. That's a list of different areas around in 1440 BC. And in this list is mentioned a people called the Shasu. Some think that this refers to Bedouins living east of the delta. So these are Bedouins and possibly Amorites, possibly Semitic people living just outside the delta region in Egypt. When Israel was wandering in the desert later on, they may have been identified with these Shasu. But when they moved to the hill country of Palestine, they probably were called a different name. People called them Papiru, which is very similar to Hebrew. And Hipiru is one of the names that appears on this topographical list. So we think that possibly the Israelites are mentioned on this list, especially through the designation Hipiru, which we're going to come across later too. Now, this ruler, Amenhotep II, is the one who is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Amenhotep II. Now, if you watch any movies or television programs or anything about the Exodus, most likely they'll say that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Ramses II. Ramses II is not for a long time later, which puts the Exodus much later than it actually happened. And the only reason that they have for thinking that Ramses II was the Pharaoh of the Exodus is because in the book of Exodus it talks about the Israelites, when they're slaves, building cities of Ramses. Well, recent discoveries have shown that Ramses was not just the name used by Ramses II, that was kind of a nickname used by previous pharaohs as well. So it was kind of a family name long before. So that particular fact that they built cities called Ramses should not make us center in only on a pharaoh named Ramses. I think that the other facts that I'm going to be showing you demonstrate that the Exodus, in fact, took place much earlier at the time I am showing you. I think I'm going to be showing you a lot of information that I think pinpoints it to be at this time. So I believe it's Amenhotep II that is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and he's the one that receives the plagues. He's the one to whom Moses comes and says, "Let my people go." Now remember, he is the son of Thutmose III, who hates Hatshepsut, hates Moses. Do you think he passed that on down to his son? Probably. If he knows Moses at all, he knows that he is hated. So we don't have any of that given to us in Exodus, but we do know that Moses shows up, and it's quite possible that Amenhotep II knows who he is. It's quite possible. Don't know for sure, but I would think it's likely that he would have heard stories from his father about his hated sister Hatshepsut and Moses. All right, now, before we look at the plagues of Egypt, I want us to do a little research concerning the gods of Egypt, because there's going to be a relationship between the plagues and the gods. And so, let's see, tomorrow, let's get the Chromebooks, bring them with you tomorrow, and we'll start doing a little research on the gods of Egypt. Okay, everybody got it? All right. Look over your materials so that you don't have to try to learn it all at once before the quiz or test that's coming up. Look over these facts. Does anybody have any questions about the different people that I've mentioned today? Or the events? I hope you see at this point how the life of Moses and the princess Hatshepsut may have intertwined. I know that's not proof positive, but I think we'll see more proof coming up when we get to the actual Exodus itself. We'll see that there are things that happen that really pinpoint the time frame of when it happened, which then takes us back to Hatshepsut as the logical choice.